Neighbor Horror Stories, Volume 1, The Haunting of Apartment 305, Part 3, The Final Night. I could barely breathe as the silence fell heavy after those 3 knocks, the whisper hanging in the air. "Come out, Matt." I sat frozen, heart pounding in my chest. Every instinct told me to stay put, but the silence outside the door was somehow even more terrifying. It felt like whatever had been haunting apartment 305 had finally decided to come for me. I wasn't about to face it alone. My fingers shook as I grabbed my phone, dialing Josh's number, praying he'd pick up. After what felt like an eternity, he answered, his voice groggy and confused. "Josh," I whispered, desperate not to let whatever was outside hear me. "Something's outside my door. I need you to come over, now." There was a pause on his end, but to my relief, he didn't ask questions. He'd seen enough of the horror in 305 to believe me. "All right, I'll be there in 5. While I waited, I strained my ears, listening for any sound from the hallway. Every little creak and rustle felt like it could be something, or someone, right outside, lurking in the shadows. I felt like a prisoner in my own apartment, afraid to even move. After what felt like forever, there was a knock at my door. I jumped, but then I heard Josh's voice. "Matt, open up, it's me." I scrambled to unlock the door, pulling it open just enough to let him slip in before slamming it shut and locking it again. He looked at me, his face pale and tense. "All right, man, what's going on?" Before I could answer Josh, we both froze. The air felt colder, and there was a low whisper, a voice so faint it could have been coming from inside our own heads. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone sent a chill down my spine. A whisper filled with malice and resentment, almost as if it was speaking from another realm. I explained everything to Josh in a hurried whisper, the notes, the photographs, the voices. His face went pale, and he nodded slowly, his usual confidence slipping. "Maybe we need to go back into 305, he said reluctantly. "I don't know why, but it feels like there's something we're missing, something that room wants us to see." Every part of me wanted to refuse, but he was right. Whatever had started in 305 wasn't finished. If we wanted to end this, we'd have to face it. We took deep breaths, steeling ourselves, and stepped into the hallway. It was quiet and dimly lit, but I could feel the tension thick in the air. Every step we took felt heavy, as if we were walking into something we'd never return from. When we reached 305, I hesitated. The door looked even more ominous in the low light, the black smudge by the handle appearing almost like a shadowy handprint. Josh turned the handle, and to our surprise, it opened easily, creaking as we stepped inside. The darkness enveloped us, and I fumbled for my phone, turning on the flashlight. The room was still as we'd left it, empty and cold, with deep scratches covering the walls, and those haunting photographs scattered across the floor. As we moved further inside, I spotted something I hadn't noticed before. A small trapdoor in the corner, half hidden beneath a faded rug. It looked like it hadn't been disturbed in years, but something about it felt wrong, as if the air around it was colder than the rest of the room. Josh knelt down and tugged the rug aside, revealing the trapdoor fully. We exchanged uneasy glances, and with a shaky nod, he pulled it open. A rush of cold, damp air hit us, smelling of mold and decay. A narrow set of wooden stairs led down into darkness. "Are we really doing this?" I whispered, feeling my stomach twist with dread. "We've come this far," Josh replied, though he didn't sound entirely convinced himself. Slowly we descended the stairs, the wood creaking beneath our weight. Each step felt like a descent into some forgotten, hidden nightmare. The walls were damp and covered in something dark and sticky. I tried not to think about what it could be, focusing instead on keeping my breathing steady. When we reached the bottom, our flashlights revealed a small, cramped basement lined with shelves, each one filled with jars and strange trinkets, a mix of old, faded photographs, lockets, and other personal belongings. And on the far wall was a large mirror, cracked down the middle. As we approached, I caught a glimpse of our reflections. But something was wrong. In the reflection, a dark figure stood behind us, its face obscured, watching us with hollow, sunken eyes. I turned, expecting to see someone, but there was nothing there, just the empty room. "Josh, do you see that?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. He nodded, his face pale. "Yeah, let's get out of here, Matt, now." But as we turned to go, the door above us slammed shut, leaving us trapped. The mirror began to vibrate, the cracks spider-webbing out, and a faint whisper filled the air, growing louder, echoing off the walls. It was the same voice I'd heard before, but now it was clearer, angrier. "Why did you leave me here?" it rasped. "Why did you forget me?" I was frozen in place, heart racing, but Josh grabbed my arm, shaking me out of my trance. "Matt, we need to find a way out." We searched the walls, desperately looking for another exit. But there was nothing, just solid stone and the relentless whispers filling our heads. Then, as if it sensed our fear, the mirror shattered, sending shards of glass scattering across the room. In the middle of where the mirror had been, a small, dark doorway appeared, leading into another room. I wanted to turn and run, to escape this nightmare, but I couldn't look away. I was drawn toward it, as if some unseen force was pulling me forward. "Matt, don't go in there," Josh warned, his voice laced with fear. But I took a step forward, then another, until I was standing at the threshold. Inside, the room was dimly lit by a single candle, and in the center stood a figure, a woman dressed in old-fashioned clothes, her face pale and eyes hollow. She looked at me with an expression of sadness and resentment, her voice barely more than a whisper. "They left me here," she said. "Abandoned me. Forgotten." I couldn't move, couldn't look away from her haunted gaze. I'm sorry," I stammered, not knowing what else to say. She reached out, her hand cold and solid as it brushed my cheek. "You can bring me back," she whispered, "but you must remember." Suddenly, I was overwhelmed by images, flashes of people moving into 305 only to disappear, faces filled with terror as they realized they were trapped, forgotten. And in every scene, she was there, watching, waiting. With a gasp, I stumbled back, breaking free from her gaze. Josh grabbed my arm, pulling me away, and together we ran back up the stairs, not stopping until we burst out into the hallway, slamming the door of 305 behind us. We stood there panting, hearts racing, as the whispers faded into silence. The hallway was empty, the building eerily quiet, as if nothing had happened. But I knew better. The image of her face, those hollow eyes, was burned into my mind. That night I packed my things and left, unable to shake the feeling that I was being watched. I tried to forget, to bury the memories of 305 and the strange woman trapped inside, but the whispers never left me. Months later, I learned that someone new had moved into 305. A young couple full of hope and excitement. I wanted to warn them, to tell them the truth, but I knew they wouldn't believe me, just like I hadn't believed the warnings left for me. And sometimes in the dead of night, I think I hear her voice, faint and sorrowful, asking the same question. "Why did you forget me?"